She had spent years trapped behind the walls of a house that looked perfect to outsiders but was nothing more than a cage inside. Every door felt like a lock, every window a reminder that freedom was something she could only dream of, and every smile she forced in public was just a mask to hide the fear that never left her heart. Because behind closed doors, her husband was not the gentle partner people assumed, but a storm of rage, control, and cruelty, the kind that crushed her spirit, until she could hardly remember the sound of her own laughter. Nights became the hardest, when silence filled the rooms but her heart pounded with the echo of footsteps, never knowing if tonight would bring an argument, a slammed door, or words that cut deeper than any blade. And slowly the woman who once dreamed of a family filled with warmth began to believe that maybe her life had no escape, that maybe this was all she was destined for, a prison built out of vows spoken under pressure and a marriage certificate that felt like shackles. Yet somewhere deep inside, a spark remained, a whisper of courage that had not been completely extinguished, and it told her that if she didn't run now, if she didn't claim her life back, the fear would consume her forever. So one night, under a sky heavy with stars that seemed to call her name, she gathered what little courage she had left, wrapped herself in an old shawl, and fled barefoot down a dirt road, her tears mixing with the dust, her breath coming fast with both terror and hope, not knowing where she was going, only knowing that anywhere was better than the life she left behind. Hours later, exhausted and trembling in the cold night air, she stumbled near a lonely stretch of land where the soft glow of a campfire flickered, and there by the flames sat a cowboy, rugged, weathered by the world, yet with eyes that carried a gentleness she had almost forgotten existed. He looked up, noticed her shaking frame, and without asking for details, without judgment, he reached for his saddlebag, pulled out a thick wool blanket, and draped it over her shoulders as though shielding her not just from the cold but from every fear that had ever touched her. For the first time in years, she felt safe, not because she had found a place, but because she had found a soul who didn't demand, didn't shout, didn't seek to break her down, just offered her warmth in silence, as if saying, "You don't have to explain. You're safe here." That small gesture, a blanket against the night, became the moment her shattered world began to mend. Days turned into weeks, and though trust was not something she could give easily, the cowboy never rushed her, never pressed her with questions she wasn't ready to answer. Instead, he showed her what love looked like in action, how he'd rise before dawn to tend the horses, how he'd laugh softly at the smallest things, how he'd treat every creature, even the stray dog that followed him around, with respect and kindness. And slowly she began to see that love wasn't chains or fear or manipulation. It was freedom. It was peace. It was the steady rhythm of two hearts finding harmony without force. At first she felt guilty for smiling, guilty for enjoying the warmth of his presence, as if she were betraying the vows she once made. But the cowboy taught her gently that surviving wasn't betrayal, escaping wasn't shame, and that every soul deserved a chance to live in the light instead of the shadows. With each passing day, she discovered pieces of herself she thought she had lost forever. The sound of her laughter, echoing across the open fields, the way her hands no longer shook when she held someone's gaze, the dreams she once buried blooming again in the soil of freedom. The cowboy gave her more than a blanket that night. He gave her proof that life after fear was not only possible but beautiful, that love could be soft, patient, and healing instead of terrifying. And though scars remained, because scars always do, she wore them with pride now, a reminder that she had walked through fire and found her way to safety. Her story was no longer one of captivity but of courage, no longer of fear but of freedom, no longer of pain but of love. She escaped a marriage filled with fear, and in return, the cowboy handed her not just a blanket, but a life full of love, respect, and hope for the future, proving that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change the course of an entire life. And if you're listening to this story, let it remind you that no matter how dark your situation may seem, there is always a path toward the light, always a chance to find your freedom, and always someone out there ready to hand you warmth when the cold has nearly broken you. Never give up, never stop believing in your worth, because love, the right kind of love, is waiting for you too. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because here we share tales of courage, hope, and love that will remind you of the strength within your own soul. And by subscribing, you won't just hear stories, you'll be part of a family that believes in rising above fear and embracing the life you truly deserve. The morning sun spilled golden light across the wide plains, waking her to a peace she had never known, the kind of silence that wasn't filled with dread but with promise. And as she stirred from the makeshift bed the cowboy had offered her inside, his modest cabin, she felt the weight of her past pressing at the edges of her mind, yet softened by the presence of this man who asked for nothing but offered everything. He greeted her with a gentle nod, the steam of his coffee rising in the crisp morning air, and though his words were few, there was a steadiness in his presence that spoke louder than 1,000 empty promises she had endured before. In the weeks that followed, she became a quiet part of his world, watching him work the ranch with hands calloused not from violence but from years of honest labor, listening to the creak of saddle leather as he mounted his horse at dawn, and learning that kindness didn't need grand gestures. It lived in the way he left a lantern lit on the porch so she'd never feel the darkness pressing in, the way he made space for her voice without ever drowning it out, the way he taught her to trust herself again by letting her ride beside him, the wind rushing through her hair as if it carried away every memory of fear. Yet healing was not instant. There were nights she woke trembling, her body recoiling from shadows, her breath short and frantic, and each time the cowboy would quietly set aside his book or put down his cup, offering no questions, only presence, sitting close enough to remind her she wasn't alone, far enough to let her breathe freely. And slowly her soul began to understand that love was never about control, it was about choice. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, she found herself telling him fragments of her story, the way her marriage had been painted as stability but had rotted into control and cruelty, how she had lost friends, lost family ties, lost herself piece by piece until she became nothing but a shadow of the woman she once dreamed of being. Tears blurred her vision as she confessed. She had run not only from a man but from the version of herself that believed she deserved that kind of life. The cowboy listened, silent, his gaze steady, and when her words broke into sobs, he offered his hand, not to pull her forward, not to bind her, but simply to say, "I hear you, I see you, you are not broken beyond repair." That night marked the beginning of her rebirth, for she realized that survival was not weakness but the bravest thing she had ever done, and with his quiet support she started to believe in her own strength again. As the days stretched into months, the ranch became more than a refuge. It became a canvas on which she painted a new life, her laughter spilling across the fields as she helped tend to the horses, her voice growing surer as she learned to handle reins and ropes, her heart steadying with each sunrise she witnessed from the porch beside him. Their bond deepened in ways words could hardly capture, not a whirlwind romance, but a slow, steady fire that burned warmer with each passing day. And she discovered that love was not about grand declarations, but about the comfort of silence shared without fear, the joy of simple meals eaten side by side, the thrill of seeing her reflection in his eyes and realizing she was not a prisoner anymore, but a partner, equal and free. Still, the past had its grip, and one afternoon, when she saw a rider in the distance who bore the same rigid stance as the man she once fled, terror surged through her, threatening to undo all the progress she had made. But the cowboy placed a steady hand on her shoulder, grounding her, reminding her that she was no longer the woman who cowered in silence. She was the woman who had escaped, survived, and chosen life. And as the rider passed without pause, she exhaled a breath she didn't know she had been holding, realizing that fear might visit, but it no longer ruled her. The seasons turned, and with them she bloomed. She began to write again, filling journals with hopes and stories she had once buried. She planted flowers by the porch that painted the land with colors of resilience. And one evening, under a sky blazing with stars, she told the cowboy that for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was merely surviving, she was living. He smiled then, a rare, tender smile that reached his eyes, and simply said, "That's all I ever wanted for you." And in that moment, she understood that love wasn't about being saved. It was about being given the space and strength to save yourself, with someone walking beside you, not in front, not behind, but side by side. Her story was no longer one of fear and flight, but of courage and rebirth, and though scars remained, they told not of weakness but of triumph, proof that she had walked through fire and found love, not the kind that cages, but the kind that frees. So to anyone listening, Let her journey remind you that no matter how impossible your escape may feel, no matter how heavy the chains of fear, there is always a way forward, always a chance to build a life you deserve, and always a kind of love that heals instead of hurts. Never settle for less, never believe that fear is your destiny, because courage is already inside you waiting to rise. And if this story gave you hope, if it touched your heart, and reminded you that love and freedom are worth fighting for, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because here we tell stories that breathe life into weary souls, stories that remind you of your strength, stories that may just be the blanket you need on the cold nights of your journey. So subscribe now, and walk with us in this family of courage, hope, and unshakable love.